Well, welcome everyone to the FLATE Webinar Series. This is our third session of cybersecurity for manufacturing technicians with Dr. Ron Eaglin from Daytona State College. He's going to push on with the ideas he's gone before. So if you haven't watched those or weren't able to participate to 1 and 2, those are recorded, and there'll be a link at the end of this session that you can get to those, or Teresa will put them all in the chat. All right, so first we're going to spend a few slides here about FLATE and what we do, just in case you don't know. So FLATE works with educators and trying to connect them to manufacturers and make sure their curriculum is really the best for the workforce, for the manufacturing workforce in the state. So we work with curriculum, reform and development. A lot of that work is with the Department of Education, along with the educators and industry partners, trying to recruit students into all your programs around the state at all levels. We provide professional development for educators, but for anyone actually, but primarily focused on the educators, like the webinar series we're in today. And lastly, we do a little bit of work in technician education research, so to help guide us in how we do what we do. Next. So we do work primarily through a network of colleges that offer the Associate of Science and Engineering Technology. This is around the state. There's about 20 plus colleges that offer this program. And the faculty and program managers work together, collaborate quite a bit, meeting twice a year, but also just sharing best practices, curriculum, resources, and ideas for what their industry partners are saying across the state. So that meeting is for the spring is actually next weekend. So next Thursday and Friday at Daytona State, where Ron is. He's our host this time. So lots of good connections there to those colleges. So some of those activities that we do, a lot of different kinds of outreach events. We've been doing some speed networking events, go to career fairs, recruitment activities of different kinds around the state, whatever. So if you've got some of those things going on, consider inviting us. We'll come if we can. It's not always possible, but certainly we can't come if we're not invited. The curriculum we mentioned, we also have a manufacturing educator awards program. We honor educators from manufacturing every year in secondary and post-secondary education, plus their community partners, the manufacturers or community members that really help them support manufacturing education in the state. Those folks are just about to get announced for 2023, so stay tuned for that information, and always consider nominating someone that you know. It's a pretty simple process next year or in the future. I just talked about the forum where we convene the engineering technology programs, college representatives from around the state. That's in the next week. And we have a new product that we're really proud of, this data dashboard that I think we'll have an image of in a minute. So I'll talk more about that then. And we also really try to help individually mentor programs, what courses they should teach, or try to help with curriculum and possibly with equipment. You know, what's the best for a particular program for a particular activity. So there you have it. Next. So here's the remaining, the list of the remaining live webinars for this spring, and I guess through May, as I see here. Starting at the end of this week on Friday, it'll be really interesting about robotics and AI, artificial intelligence, coming up this week by somebody from Polk State College. Will be leading that. We'll be creating videos using classroom projects in April, and also how to increase student diversity in engineering technology programs, or probably any industrial technology programs will be covered there. It won't be so specific to just ET. And our last cybersecurity last in the series of the Cybersecurity's PD event. So stay tuned for those. Let's see, I just talked about the ET Forum. We are partnering with FNUC, a Central Florida College, and the Jagger Education Corporation to host this Robotics Day at the College of Central Florida in Ocala. They're an official training center for FNUC robots, and have I think 5 or 6 of the robots there in their facility. But this is organized by the FNUC organization out of Michigan, and they've invited their industry partners, and we're inviting the educators, and we're trying to bring everyone together to think robotics and push technology and manufacturers a little bit farther down the Industry 4.0 road. So this is a free event. We do have from one of our NSF grants stipends for educators to attend this. So if you're interested, you can sign up. I believe it was in the newsletter yesterday. There's a link to register for that. And lastly, in June, we're having a Summer Teachers Institute at St. Pete College. It's a 4-day workshop or institute, just updates and activities and information about manufacturing that probably primarily high school teachers will be interested in, to things they can add into their programs, or if they're starting a new program, it would be a great opportunity to learn some stuff and get some information for that program. All right. Here's our websites. You can go to those to get all this information. And our newsletter, you can get to sign up for it there. Here's the front page of the data dashboard, which is called Manufacturing Matters Florida. So on this page, we're going to have all of the schools that offer manufacturing related programs. Each button will be, when you roll over it, will have a bunch of information about the program and some enrollment information. This is meant for not just educators, but also for manufacturers to find partner schools that are near them. It's one of our goals, still trying to connect the educators and the industry folks. And there's a lot more information on this. We should probably do a webinar on the whole of the dashboard. Let's go through some of the opportunities and information that's provided here. But we'll leave it for you to explore the rest that's available, the rest of the information available here. So, and our contact information, some of that will be in the chat as well. So we'll just, I think, now get ready to move on to Ron. I'll turn it over to you.
All righty. Well, next thing I do is I share, so make sure it shares the right screen. That one, I think. Let's see if it comes up correctly. All right, you should see a slide.
Looks good. Yeah.
All right. So sessions 1 and 2 we've done. Session 2 we just completed, which was the looking over 2 of the case studies that in manufacturing and cybersecurity. We did the Colonial Pipeline attack and the Stuxnet attack that was in Iran. Just kind of give you an idea of what some of these things look like. Today, as we're going to prepare for the last one, I'm going to try to make it as interesting when we get to 4. I'm going to kind of give a plug for 4, because 4 is going to cover good old NISTIR 8183, the Cybersecurity Framework Manufacturing Profile, which is essentially the set of instructions of how to set up and how to set up your organization to be able to defend and respond to any type of cyber activity that could be malicious. And it's a long, dry, fill in the blanks type of document that helps you develop your cybersecurity plan. But the most important piece of the overall cybersecurity plan is what I'm actually talking about today, which is cybersecurity hygiene. And we're going to kind of just go through, and this is applicable across the board, manufacturing, any industry, the overall hygiene of how every individual handles different activities that are malicious is what really protects any organization. So just like physical hygiene protects you in ways against getting sick, getting viruses and stuff. Cyber hygiene is the same type of thing. So see if I can get this to advance correctly. Yes. So what we'll look at are what kind of threats there are. And we're going to actually we're going to delve directly into how hackers get to you and what you need to do to protect yourself. A lot of it's going to be just an application of common sense and then some actions that you can take. And the actions here are again, applicable all across the board. I'm not just talking manufacturing here, because basic overall hygiene is what everybody needs to be able to be successful and not getting hacked or not having malicious actors get to you. So first thing is really, you need to understand first, there's always going to be bad people that are trying to get, if you've got money, there's always going to be people that want to try to take it. But that's actually not the only motivation that you have to hacking. So the most active hacking groups are essentially there to make money, and the best organized, that's their purpose. There's actually other hacking groups that have different motivations, but those are looking at that concept of state actors. So hacking is now the modern version of warfare. If you want to try to cripple the capability of a government or the business within a country, then organized malicious state hacking is one way to go about that. And we have hacking groups that are malicious state actor hacking groups that are always coming against our country. And we have a well-organized both defense and offense going the opposite direction. We have hackers that do, go reversing. That's what we talked about when we were talking about the Stuxnet virus. The hackers are also classified by a number of classifications. And the ones, what we call the bad guys, but the reality is that when you talk about the bad guys, there's a tremendous number of flavors to those bad guys, but hackers are identified by basically colored hats. So black hat is the term used for those hackers that have a malicious intent. And gain, when we talk about exploit for gain, we usually do mean financial gain, but at the same time, it can be all sorts of other types of reasons. But the bottom line is that the intent is not in your best interest. It's malicious intent. So first looking at when we talk about hacking, okay, there's a lot of different ways to hack, but essentially hacks exploit weaknesses. And the weaknesses can be a lot of different things. They can be weaknesses that are weaknesses in your actual computer systems. We have names for many of these types of weaknesses. One of the names of an unexploited weakness that is something that is available, a path by which we can hack, is called an O-day or a 0-day. And that is a hack that is not been identified and patched by the people who operate or own or sell the different computer systems. And when I talk about systems, I mean everything. I mean hardware systems, operating systems. A typical PC that most people use can consist of an operating system on top of a hardware system. And the hardware system has its own software also. So the vulnerabilities can actually exist in both those systems. One of the interesting hacks that I'd actually seen perpetrated was, I won't name where it was done, but a person, the organization had left the BIOS of their computers unpassword protected. So a group of students had realized that the BIOSes were unguarded, and they went in and logged into the BIOS of each machine. And the BIOS, you probably don't really ever see this, except that when you boot up your machine, you actually have the ability to hit some keys on your keyboard and get into what we call the BIOS, which is the hardware operating system that underlies your Windows or whatever you're using, Windows or Mac operating system. They then set a password on all of those BIOSes and were able to successfully lock the organization out of their own computers. So as soon as those computers got rebooted up, they could no longer get into their BIOS. So, something that, so understanding that there's more than just that operating system that sits on top of that. Then I've given you kind of 3 types of hacking here that we look at. We got the black hat, which are basically, you can just say those are the bad guys. They're not trying to do you any favors. The white hat, and I've worked as a white hat hacker. White hat hackers are ones that are trying to identify where the vulnerabilities exist, either in your computers or in your organization. My white hat hacking was almost always done through social engineering and not through physically just trying to break into systems using weaknesses in the computer systems. And then you've got those people that are gray hat, which are essentially like the situation that I just explained to you is actually an example of gray hat hacking. The students eventually gave control of the BIOS back over to the school that they had locked everybody, this was at a university, had locked the university out of all their computer systems, BIOS systems, but they gave them the password and said, hey, look, we identified that you had left a vulnerability here, and we identified it, and to get your attention, we did this. And I can actually state that back a while back, this is a good 15 years ago, I identified a massive vulnerability to the systems that protected student data. And it was actually a large enough vulnerability that I could send somebody a URL and then give that person, just by sending them the URL, full access to all the student records for an individual student. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to log in or anything. They just could click on the URL and it would pop up the student that I identified and had put into that URL. And to get the attention of the school, I sent the URL to the director, to the CIO, and said, because I had actually pointed it out and said that you have a massive vulnerability, you need to get in touch with me immediately to work on a fix for this vulnerability. 2 days went by and I hadn't gotten any response. And then I just sent the URL to the CIO and I said, you really don't want me sending this to the provost or the president because this is a massive vulnerability. And at that point, I actually got the attention and we were able to execute a fix. I wasn't trying to cause anybody any harm. I just wanted to point out that there had been a vulnerability. And this is the type of stuff that goes on literally all the time in the background. There's always people, the vast majority of people that do security and hacking are white hat or sometimes gray hat, which is just an activity that can be very, with good intentions. And, in my case, it was like, I needed this to be fixed. It was a big deal. And I had to execute a gray hat hack to actually get the attention of the people involved to say, this needs to be fixed and it needs to be fixed immediately. And they did. It did happen. So that's a little bit more about the gray hat, since I've actually done gray hat. I don't violate any laws or ethical standards, but that doesn't mean that all gray hat hackers are always going to follow that type of thing. And it's actually kind of scary when you get that message from a gray hat, and we call them gray hats, when you get that message from a gray hat saying, I discovered a situation that needs to be remedied. And, this is, because when you're a white hat, you're hired to do this. And you go out and you look at the vulnerabilities and you come back and you say, here's the report of everything that I found. When you're gray hat, you just discover it. And I wouldn't say accidentally, the actual situation that I had suspected that there was a vulnerability based on what I knew of how the system worked. And I tested it to see if the vulnerability was actually real. I then discovered that it was a legitimate vulnerability. I notified people of that vulnerability, and then I actually gave a demonstration of how that vulnerability worked. And that would actually be considered gray hat hacking. So that's a little bit of, I know that's kind of an interesting, I always find this interesting. I don't know how many people else do, but it's worth understanding how all this actually works and what goes on in the background. That not every hacker is a bad guy, and not every hacker is a good guy. There's a lot of people who just actually do execute hacks. If you ever watched the movie War Games, one of the great movies on there, Matthew Broderick is actually playing somebody who thinks he's hacking into a game company to play a game early, and remember, he actually ends up hacking into the Department of Defense and almost launching a thermonuclear war, which of course makes the entire movie very exciting. If you haven't watched it, it's definitely a movie worth watching, because a lot of the things that are in that movie are still relevant today, especially the concept of the artificial intelligence that was controlling the defense systems, which is another topic of interest that hopefully we'll be giving you more on later. So what are some of the things that happen? Well, I would be remiss if I did not talk about one of the, and this isn't really a hack, but talk about denial of service. But denial of service actually oftentimes uses hacked machines. So this is a malicious attack. A denial of service attack is where somebody's trying to make something unavailable by actually taking a lot of machines and then targeting them to all start either pinging or requesting information from a known service, which essentially overloads that service and shuts it down. You don't necessarily have to have a hacker to do this. Like Ticketmaster, when it was brought down just recently with the Taylor Swift ticket sales, that was actually the entire pure mimic of a denial of service attack, but it was just people looking for tickets, overwhelmed the system and brought it down. And that happens on a fairly regular basis, but it's also done via hacking. So hackers will often target, and groups of hackers will target something that's a service because they're upset or they believe there's been some injustice and take it down. They're not actually hacking into that computer. They're not stealing anything off of that computer. They're just taking it down. But another type of hacking is to look for flaws in either the software, and then we also there's a lot of names for the other piece of this. Sometimes it's called meatware. That's the human that's in the system. Or we also call it the wetware. I think that comes from the CIA term from wet works, that's when you actually go out and shoot people. Those are some of the terms that they use. We talked a little bit about what 0-day is. We've also talked about the fact that you don't have to have a 0-day to get in. The way vulnerabilities are plugged is through patches. So you often get security updates to your operating system, but if you don't execute those security updates and update the actual security, those flaws that existed earlier that were identified along the way are still unpatched and are still vulnerabilities. So the vulnerabilities can be through software that is just simply not through the appropriate execution of patches. And most people nowadays do use I mean, if you're using Windows on a fairly regular basis, nearly once or twice a week, will issue an update. It'll go through, it'll install the update. It'll sometimes have you have to reboot your machine to do it. But a lot of times those updates are including the patches that you need to make sure that those flaws that were in your system don't let other people in. Passwords. And I really do, there's a lot that I can say about passwords that are important here, but one of the ways that people get in through systems through using your password is to actually purchase the password. And I'm going to talk about how that's done. Then another way of doing it is guessing it. Many times what I do find is that people have a tendency to write their passwords down on things and then set that password next to their computer. So their password is written on a piece of paper that by looking around a little bit, they can find that. I actually call that guessing the password, because what you'll do is you'll see something odd written on a piece of paper or something that's sitting there near the machine. And it's like, well, what could this possibly be? It was probably a password into either the computer or into one of the systems that they go into once they're in the computer. And then the other one is a brute force. And that's where, and usually brute force is not done by a human. You're not going to just sit there and type in every single possible combination of things that could be a password. But there are pieces of software that will sit there and throw out potential passwords at a system and just trying to, until it finally guesses the right answer. Now let's talk a little about this concept. I said purchase a password. In the dark web, it is possible to go in and purchase many things. One of the things that you can purchase on the dark web, and I'm not going to talk about how to get into the dark web, where the dark web is. It's an incredible ecosystem that exists out there, but it's usually an ecosystem that's used by a lot of bad guys. But you can purchase login and password information for thousands and thousands of users on the internet. And you can also purchase thousands and thousands of social security numbers. You can purchase them unverified or verified. And the people who gather this data, sell it on the dark web, are not the same people that actually are using the data to perpetrate hacks or identity theft or any of those things. They're actually, it's a very specialized ecosystem where you have people that specialize in gathering passwords and people that get in gathering social security numbers and other types of data that is then sold to other people for malicious intent. So you're thinking, where do these people get these passwords from that they then turn around and sell? Well, they hack into systems to see if they can gather login user information. In a well-written system, it's impossible to gather passwords and logins because the passwords are going to be going through what we call a hash algorithm, and you don't actually ever store any type of password. I'm not going to go into the details of how the hash algorithms actually is what I'm covering right now in class is what we call hash algorithms. But the reality is that it's possible to build systems where you don't have to store login information or any passwords at all. You don't have to store passwords. But there are systems out there that do that. Hackers go in, they try to find these passwords or use them. They can also do it through all sorts of things like hacking into individual systems and using keystroke logging software. But then they gather all this and then they turn around and sell it in the dark web. The Colonial Pipeline attack that I referred to in the last lecture was actually perpetrated by a login and password combination that had been purchased off the dark web that had been used to actually get into those systems at Colonial. So these are dangerous ways of doing this. Now, how do people get this? This is where we really get into how we get into hygiene. the first part of hygiene is don't use the same. I'm going to go back one slide. The first thing is don't use the same password on everything. One way to get around this is to actually use a password manager and have different, very convoluted passwords for all your systems and have a password manager that manages them. But then a vulnerability in a master password then can give access to all the other types of passwords that are there. So if you do this, that master password is now sacrosanct. It's the it needs to be long. It needs to be very difficult to figure out. It might mean something to you, but it needs to be something that wouldn't mean anything to anybody else. That is one way. And then you have a password manager that keeps track of all these other passwords so that users can't get to the other stuff. But then again, you also have to make sure that that master password, I use one, I do use a password management system. I've got literally thousands of logins and passwords that I need to manage. But how do most people get in? This is where social engineering comes into play. Most people get in because you let them in. And there are the two primary methods of how people let them in. There's phishing and there's spear phishing. Let's first talk about phishing. Phishing is that message that you get that usually has, a lot of times, there's stuff in that message that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, but at the same time, that impulse to click on it and take care of the situation. So we're going to kind of look at this. First, phishing. Common fishes. This is what we call the bait. You know, when you go out fishing, you might use a worm, you might use a minnow, whatever. We've noticed suspicious activity on your account. Okay, almost always, not almost, always a phish attempt. Nobody out of the blue comes up and goes, we've noticed suspicious activity on your account, we want you to log in. There is a problem with your account that you need to remedy. Okay, got to do it. You need to confirm this information. You are eligible for a free. This one, I'm not just going to use the term generic greeting. Hello, valued user. We have this offer for you today. Your account is on hold. Those are great ones. So here's where we get to have some fun. All right. This is a fish. This is an obvious fish. This fish actually came, I pulled these off of, this is a fish that came from somebody that I knew. Okay. You know, so an account sends me a message with this. I know it's a fish. All right. How do you know this is a fish? This is now I'm asking the group. You get to look at this and say, what makes you look at this going, okay, what's going on here?
The first thing is the grammar is all out of sorts.
The grammar is all out of sorts. That's a big one. The grammar is out of sorts, and I know the person. Like they would. Well, first thing is I know the person. They wouldn't send me this. Also, isn't this pretty vague? And if somebody died in an accident, why would I be getting a message that has a link to tiktok.ace1.us? So all sorts of this, a lot of things about this look really, really fishy. Well, that is because it's exactly what it is. Now, in the situation here, it comes from somebody that I know. So what is the correct course of action to do? Well, first thing is like, okay, there's a possibility that his account has been hacked, or if it's a Facebook account, it could potentially also be spoofed. So this is worth talking about. People can hack into somebody else's account. They can get into their Facebook account and send you messages, or their TikTok, or their their Instagram, or any of the social media services. But they can also be spoofed. Spoof is where they simply grab some information off of the account, a picture, a little bit of personal information, and they make another account with exactly the same name. Facebook does a horrendous job of stopping spoofing. I mean, literally, when people spoof another person's account, they use the same name, the same profile picture, and the same personal information that they got from the Facebook account, and then make another account to look like that person. And I've reported hundreds of these to Facebook, and Facebook a lot of times is like, well, we don't care. But the reality is that it's almost like a gimme to Facebook. It's an exact copy of an existing account that's existed for 2 days and has one friend. It's not hard to figure out that it's that. So, you know, a little bit of research and you figure this stuff out. Let's have a little bit more fun. All right. Well, first, the fact that I don't even have an Apple ID. These are ones that came to me. So yeah. But assuming that I did have an Apple ID, you know, what are the obvious things that you see here?
The email, the response is not going to an Apple.
Right, exactly. I mean, onlinehome.us. I mean, it's not going to apple.com. Now realize that even if that URL said apple.com, it doesn't necessarily mean the link goes to apple.com, because you have the ability to put one thing in the title portion and one thing in the other, and one thing in the actual what you see, and one thing what's behind it. But the other thing is that I believe this one came to me as a text message. I'm trying to remember what it was. I've pulled these off and I just grab what I find to be interesting ones. And I mean, I don't have an Apple ID, and I wouldn't be getting a text message out of the blue from Apple with non-specific information. But people do fall for this. So you need to make sure, I mean, you need to understand that these are problems. Okay, that was the one that we just did. This one has all sorts of problems. What I do love, the fact that if I don't complete the verification process before 12 hours, my Amazon account gets terminated. That in itself, I mean, without anything else in here that's really bad, should be. And then notification _notice -prime about, I mean, everything about this says, now, but here's the thing. If I'm getting this message, a lot of other people get this message, if it didn't work at all, they wouldn't be doing it. So being able to educate people on understanding, and of course, I got a link. The link is to a LinkedIn.com.
Yeah, that's really crazy.
I mean, like, that one is just a really good one. Okay, so I mean, like, and you know, love to put the Netflix on hold. Again, same thing. Your account is on hold. I'm watching Netflix as I get this message. I was actually watching Netflix when this came in. So recover your account immediately. Click the link below. Yeah, okay. And notice that onlinehome.us is in a lot of these. So and of course, the good old sense of urgency. Please take action on your account within 48 hours to avoid permanent suspension. I mean, everything. We're having trouble with your billing information, but we're going to totally suspend your account permanently. I just get a kick out of a lot of them. Now, realize these are all ones that are easy to spot the flaws. I couldn't resist on this one. This is a text message. I never deleted the first text message because I had intended to copy it for a set of presentations I was doing on this. But notice from the same phone number, later I get from Wells Fargo. So both Borja Chen and Wells Fargo use the same phone number. Again, pretty obvious ones. You should be able to, get through most of these. A good level of understanding and having that level of suspicion for everything that comes in, the spelling mistakes, the bad email, the strange phone number, the attention grabber, the sense of urgency, and the fact that the whole thing is completely vague. But this is the number one way people get into your systems, is through phishing. Now, not every phishing is this poorly done, but these poorly done ones work. Some of them are spear phishing. And spear phishing is where they actually took some time to research you, and you'll find that the messages contain personal information. They may even look like they're coming from somebody that you know that's a trusted sender. And always be suspicious of the activity that they're asking you to do if you don't feel 100% comfortable with it. And of course, in the case of spear phishing, if it's coming from somebody that you know, it's just simply a matter of fact to say, pull up the phone and go, hey, did you just send me a message? And that really quickly does the trick here. All right. With all this, and there's many others, one of the other ones that I consider to be one of my favorites is you go to a website and all of a sudden you get that pop-up that says, we've detected suspicious activity on your computer. Immediately click on this pop-up and download this piece of software. Don't. I actually had to help my poor mother clean her machine off from, she's like, well, I got the message. I clicked on it. I installed the software. I'm like, Mom, turn your machine off, unplug it. Don't do anything. That machine is now exiled until I get to your house and I can clean it, which is now clean. But I mean, I had to do that. So, but now I know that hacker, whoever got into her machine, probably got her email list and got got information about people that she knows, and is going to take that information and go the next step further. Because what you're doing is just like every type of germ. If you get a cold and you go to work and start coughing, you're giving it to everybody else. Somebody gets into your machine, they've gotten information about other people that they can then use. But there are resources. The most malicious, the most common version of the most common thing that people are trying to do is identity theft. If they can get a level of personal information on you, and I've had 2 major attempts on my identity, both of which I've been able to thwart, but there are good resources for this. So if you even suspect identity theft, and realize that identity theft can mean more than just somebody trying to get into your personal information and put out credit cards in your name and all that. It also, good hackers will go, well, now we know where the person works. We got a little bit of information about what they do. And where can this information end up? We talked about this earlier. Because remember, there are people whose job is nothing more than to go out and gather that information. It can end up on the dark web. And once it ends up on the dark web, it can be purchased by people who actually can do more malicious activity with it. They can say, oh, look, he works at such and such company. We could set up a ransomware on the company, that was Colonial Pipeline, to get through that. So that original hygiene is the most important step, but there's good resources out there. For first, if you suspect even remotely suspect that you've got any type of identity theft going on, if you get a strange letter in the mail looking from a credit card company that looks like that somebody's trying to open up a credit card, that's how I spotted the first one and was able to thwart it. Identitytheft.gov has all the tools you need to know exactly what to do and what order to do them in to solve that problem. Okay. Now, other things. I use a password manager and I do go through the changing of passwords. I don't really know. You know, I'm looking for good empirical evidence that password change policies actually work. They do work in one respect. If you've got a password that's been out there and has been compromised and it's made it to the dark web, changing your password now makes that old data invalid. But I truly believe that you're better off and that password never having made it to the dark web in the first place. And I have different passwords on all my systems. I use a password manager to manage all those passwords. I have a very secure login to that password manager, plus biometric, plus two-factor authentication. So it's very difficult for somebody to get into my password manager. They would have to both know my password, have my fingerprint, and be able to actually get authenticated by me via two-factor authentication. The other thing is if you suspect something going on, like my mom, who at least called me and said, Ronnie, this is what she calls me, Ronnie, I think that I got something wrong with my machine. Somebody they can trust, and that could be people that you know, but also the services that you think are actually involved in the attempt altogether. If you think somebody's trying to open up a credit card in your name, you contact the credit card company. There's also, of course, the good old software that you've got right there. Norton. I just gave you 4 of the services that I know and trust: Norton, Total AV, McAfee, and Bitdefender. There are others. These are well-known services. Do not install a cleaning or protection software on your computer unless you know positively that that service is a trusted one. All right. Actually, right here, what I want to do at this stage is, if anybody's got any questions,
We'll pick it up.
Yeah, we definitely will pick it up, because you have to have that extra order.
Yeah,
yep. I think we got Marilyn in there.
I'm here.
Oh, I didn't know. I heard another voice. I wanted to open up to any questions here. Just I
Okay.
know of all 4 of the things that I'm giving in the workshops that I'm doing, this one is the most generic, but it's also by far the most important, because this is really where your defense is going to come in right at the very beginning. And I know everybody probably here has actually seen some of this type of activity. And by the way, I can tell you right now, I also get targeted on spear phishing on a fairly regular basis, where they've got good information on me. I don't actually put those up there, because what I really don't want to do is take all that personal information and throw it up on a slide and throw it out on the internet.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks a lot, Ron. This is really important, and it's important to review some of these things for all of us. So we tend to get sloppy and busy, I guess, maybe busy and then sloppy with some of this hygiene. So I think it's a great opportunity. Some really good slides are nice and crisp and clear, so everybody can follow along and remember what was.
I tried to put this down at the level everybody's going to understand this, because this is, and I know what you're saying, Marilyn, is people get lazy and sloppy.
Yeah.
But from somebody who is under constant attack and deals with constant attacks and deals with helping people get, deal with the consequences of this.
Yeah.
It's worth the extra 5 minutes to not be sloppy.
No, I totally agree. I actually haven't had that experience yet, knock on wood, but
Yeah.
I am pretty careful and do follow along exactly what you do. Look at all of those URLs and say, that's not really connected to this unknown person who's sending this to me,
Right.
and this, is it connected to the vendor? Those are pretty easy ways to spot something that's not authentic, and if it is, they would probably come back or try another approach if it's something that's really something you should review. I think the delivery people, the UPS and FedEx, have been kind of taken over as another place where they get people, a lot of people are connected saying, got a package, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you need to claim your package. So here's something that's actually worth, and this is for the near future, is that we are just now starting to see the beginning of AI-based hacking attacks, where the actual attackers aren't even people that are humans or bots, because bots are actually stupid. They don't have, they just automatically say plop, 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 plop. But now there's the ability to train an AI
Right.
how to hack, phish, and spoof. And because if you've played with some of the new AIs, you realize you can't tell if it's a human or not. I've been talking to GPT-4, and I cannot tell that it's not a human. And I'm pretty good. I mean, at 3.5, I could always tell. And I can spend some time with it and eventually delve down to the fact that I can figure out that it's actually a machine, but it won't even tell me it's a machine. It'll lie before it tells me it's a machine.
Wow. So another adventure in cybersecurity, once we finally get through all of these ideas and get more and more people to really pay attention to how important it is to secure your personal information and your professional information as well, whatever you're working with.
Yes.
Does anyone out there have a question? We have a few minutes left. I think we have 7 or 8 minutes left to.
I'm gonna leave at least 5 minutes, such I did.
Yeah, we have at least 5.
We have a note in the chat from Michael Marchesano that says that criminals are using AI voice cleaning tools to dupe victims, with a link.
Yes, and I have, by the way, I have my voice is I've got I have a clone that can actually use my voice. I've trained an AI to be me, and it sounds like me. It's got a little bit, it's not exactly, but it picked up all the nuances that I use in my vocalizations, and I'm amazed.
Wow.
Well, I was playing,
Eaglins. That could be scary.
well, I was playing with it. I mean, it took me a while to train it, but I was playing with it for a presentation on AI, and I'm like, I was going to have the AI give part of the presentation and then pop in and say, that wasn't me. That was an AI reading text.
Gotcha.
Hey, Ron, this is Ernie. I was going to say, when you're at the ET Forum, we're going to ask for ideas for professional development for next year. So please bring that one up. Maybe you could do one on AI for good, because I think everybody's hearing about AI for, negative side, but there's certainly a lot of good ways you could use AI.
Oh yeah, AI's got AI. Well, here's the thing about AI. We're in right at the beginning of another technological revolution.
Yeah, definitely.
And we don't know where it's going. But obviously it's going to happen. And so for us, it's figuring out how to use it for, obviously bad guys are going to use it for bad. But at the same time, and I can tell you one thing, AI is not going to go Skynet on you. They're not going to all of a sudden start killing humans. The biggest worry that people have on the AI is that it does a lot of the things that you already do for you. So are we going to lose a lot of the skills that we have? Like how many people can pull out a paper map today and read it? Yeah. My kids are completely lost if you pull out a paper map and show it to them. They do not know how to do it. They're just simply skills that we've replaced with other types of other things, and we've lost those skills. So AIs are going to be able to do a lot of those things. AIs will be driving our cars. AIs will be deciding what we're cooking for dinner or actually cooking it. Will we lose those skills? That's the biggest worry from the people who are actually working on this now. And I keep on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. That's the way it's going to be. And we've already seen that in different ways that you might call AI. I like to go to the days when I was had to learn how to do technical drawings, in engineering school. And the big controversy of CAD programs coming online, and do we do this by hand? How much are we going to lose in the information processing, and what we need to know about blueprints and drawing those and making those technical drawings versus how fast it could be done by a machine, even in those early days of AutoCAD and drawing packages. So
Right.
that's another AI, and a lot of AI has actually been added in there, a lot of information. So you can now do lots of things. I don't think there's a person anywhere who does much hand drawing anymore, except on the back of a napkin, and things like that, right? But we thought we would lose the skill set, and it may have turned out that we don't really need that skill set of drawing anymore.
Yeah, and this is going to be the same thing we see with AI, but the reality is I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where it's going, but we don't know. I mean,
exactly. Nobody knows.
the stuff
yet.
is coming up so unbelievably fast right now. I mean, everybody talks about GPT-4. There are 5 other AI tools that will be released this year alone that are just as powerful as GPT-4.
Yeah, exactly. They're popping up almost every other day in the news.
Yep.
Any last questions, or can from the participants here? Anybody have any comments or questions for Ron? I hope everybody's thinking about taking 30 minutes and checking out all your stuff, making sure you're secure, checking your computer hygiene. On your
Well,
system.
hygiene is like this. You do it all the time. You shouldn't have to go to the site
I
and say,
know, but now we might all have to back up and catch up.
yeah, catch up to where you are. And then it's like, go take the shower. And then now you do it every day.
Feeling guilty that you haven't been keeping up with your computer hygiene.
Right. You wash your hands when you go to the bathroom. You can check your,
Check your passwords.
right.
Whatever. So if not, I guess we can wrap up and remind everyone that we have another. Thanks a lot, Ron. We really appreciate it. But we have another session with robots and AI this Friday.
Friday.
At 11. Is that right, Teresa?
Yep.
11 o'clock on Friday.
Have it. And
We got to get back to the slide. I can't remember what time it is.
It was Friday. It was 11.
It's at 10 o'clock.
Oh, it's 10
10
o'clock on Friday morning.
Okay, good.
About robots and AI. So, if you're interested in more of AI, certainly sign up or tune in to that session on Friday. And with that, I'll give you back 2 minutes unless anyone has the last comment.
And give everybody 2 minutes. Woohoo.
2 minutes.
All right. Well, I'm gonna head out. So
Yeah. Thanks everyone for attending, and you'll get the recording links from Teresa in a few days.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.